The courtroom doors burst open as Marcus Johnson strides in wearing a suit that still hangs loose on his frame after 6 months of prison food. His mother spent her last savings on this outfit, determined that her son would face this moment with dignity. Watching from the gallery, she clutches his old college graduation photo, while whispers ripple through the packed benches like wind through tall grass. Marcus feels the weight of every eye in the courtroom following his movements, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows across his face as he makes his way to the defense table, his steps echoing against the polished marble floor beneath his newly shined shoes that still feel stiff and unfamiliar after months in prison-issued slippers, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusts his father's tie, the same one he wore to his high school graduation before life took its cruel turn. Sarah Chen, his defense attorney, stands tall beside him, her small frame radiating a fierce energy that fills the massive courtroom. Her reputation for taking on impossible cases and winning them precedes her like an invisible shield. The manila folders spread before her contain 6 months of relentless investigation, late nights, and countless interviews that would finally reveal the truth. She catches Marcus' eye, giving him a subtle nod that carries more reassurance than words could ever convey. The gallery behind them fills with faces both familiar and strange. Marcus' mother, Gloria, sits in the front row, her Sunday best pressed and perfect, her Bible clutched tight in weathered hands that raised 3 children alone after his father passed, her prayers a constant whisper that only those closest can hear. Beside her sits Reverend Jackson, who posted part of Marcus' bail money and rallied the community to raise the rest. His presence a reminder that Marcus stands not alone, but with an entire community behind him. Officer Peterson and Mitchell swagger through the side door, their polished badges catching the light like warning signals, their confident grins faltering slightly as they notice the unusually large media presence today. Reporters' notebooks already open, pens hovering expectantly above blank pages, ready to record every moment of what they don't yet know will be the biggest civil rights case this county has seen in decades. The air in the courtroom grows thick with tension as Judge Martinez enters, her black robe sweeping behind her like a storm cloud, her reputation for fairness and zero tolerance for corruption preceding her like thunder before rain. The bailiff calls the court to order, his voice bouncing off the high ceilings. Marcus straightens his spine, remembering his mother's words about standing tall in the face of injustice. Sarah Chen begins arranging her evidence in precise order, each document and folder placed just so her movements deliberate and focused like a surgeon preparing instruments. The prosecution team shifts uncomfortably in their chairs, as if sensing the storm about to break, but not yet knowing from which direction it will come, their overconfidence in what they thought was an open and shut case about to be their undoing. In the back of the courtroom, Marcus' grandmother Emma sits quietly, her aged hands folding and unfolding the program from her 70th birthday party, the very celebration that would prove to be her grandson's salvation, her eyes never leading Marcus back, as if her gaze alone could protect him from the injustice that brought them all to this moment, her patience earned through 90 years of witnessing both progress and setbacks in a long arc toward justice. The morning light streams through the high windows, casting long rectangles of brightness across the courtroom floor like spotlights waiting for actors to step into their marks. Sarah Chen rises from her chair, her opening statement prepared, but not yet revealed, like a sword still in its sheath. The next words spoken in this room will begin a chain reaction that will shake the foundations of the local police department and force an entire city to confront its demons. Officer Brad Peterson adjusts his collar for the 5th time in 10 minutes, his confident smirk faltering as defense attorney Sarah Chen unpacks an unusual number of folders onto her table. Officer James Mitchell glances nervously at his partner, remembering their conversation in the patrol car that rainy night when everything started to go wrong, but neither officer notices the young expert slipping into the back row carrying a laptop that will shatter their careers. Peterson feels his starched uniform growing increasingly uncomfortable beneath his dress, lose the fabric seeming to tighten around his throat like an invisible hand as he watches Chen methodically arrange her materials, her movements precise and purposeful, reminding him of a surgeon preparing for a complicated operation, his mind racing back to that October night when the rain drummed against the patrol car roof, and Mitchell had said those words that now echo in his mind like a warning they should have heeded. Mitchell shifts in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him as his eyes dart between the defense table and the courtroom doors, counting the reporters who keep filing in, their presence unusual for what should have been a routine case, his perfectly maintained poker face beginning to crack around the edges as he notices Sarah Chen placing 3 red folders in a neat row, each one labeled with dates that make his stomach tighten with recognition, dates of other arrests that they thought were buried in the system. The young aid expert, Heaven Zhang, settles into his seat in the back row, his laptop humming to life like a weapon being primed, his fingers hovering over the keyboard as he runs one final check on the surveillance footage that took him 3 months to enhance and authenticate, the timestamp glowing in the corner of his screen like a beacon of truth that will soon illuminate the darkness of corruption, his presence unknown to the officers who never considered that technology would be their downfall. Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Torres watches the scene unfold from her position at the prosecution table, her years of experience sending warning signals through her body like electricity. She notices the slight tremor in Mitchell's left hand, the way Peterson keeps glancing at his phone, as if waiting for a message that could save them her own case files, suddenly feeling incomplete as she watches Chen arrange what appears to be an overwhelming mountain of evidence. The gallery's whispers grow louder as Sarah Chen stands to approach the bench, her heels clicking against the floor like a metronome, counting down the minutes until revelation. Judge Martinez leans forward slightly, her interest piqued by the unusual motion Chen is about to present, while Peterson unconsciously touches his badge, a gesture of reassurance that now feels hollow after 15 years on the force, his certainty beginning to crumble like a sandcastle at high tide. Officer Mitchell remembers the nights they spent carefully constructing their reports, making sure every detail aligned perfectly, never imagining that someone would dig deep enough to find the inconsistencies, never thinking about the security cameras they didn't know existed, or the witnesses they didn't bother to interview, their shortcuts and prejudices about to be exposed in the harsh light of justice, his career flashing before his eyes like a film about to reach its dramatic conclusion. Peterson watches as Chen opens the first red folder, removing a document that makes Ada Torres' eyes widen in surprise, the paper trembling slightly in her hands as she reads whatever revelations it contains, the officer's gut churning as he recognizes the familiar pattern of an internal affairs investigation report, one he thought had been buried years ago in the labyrinth of bureaucratic paperwork. The young aid expert in the back row connects his laptop to the courtroom system with quiet efficiency, his screen mirroring to the large display mounted on the wall, the blank screen looming over the proceedings like a canvas waiting for its first brush stroke of truth. Mitchell feels sweat beginning to roll down his back as he remembers every traffic stop, every arrest, every moment of profiling they justified as good police work their house of cards, waiting for the first gentle breeze that will send it all tumbling down. The bailiff approaches Sarah Chen with a stack of additional exhibits, her evidence pile growing like a monument to justice about to be served. Peterson and Mitchell exchange glances, their years of partnership speaking volumes in a single look as they realize that their biggest mistake wasn't what they did that rainy night, but rather their assumption that no one would ever care enough to look deeper into their pattern of behavior, their badges no longer feeling like shields but rather weights pulling them down into the depths of their own misconduct. Gasps echo through the courtroom as the first frame of security footage appears on screen, showing Marcus dancing with his grandmother at her 70th birthday party 20 miles from the alleged crime scene, his signature red bow tie clearly visible as he twirls her beneath sparkling party lights. Officer Peterson drops his pen, it rolls across the floor in the sudden silence, the timestamp in the corner of the video flashing like a neon sign pointing to truth. Heaven Zhang, the eye expert, stands beside the projection screen, his laser pointer circling the crystal clear timestamp October 15, 9:35 p.m., the exact moment Peterson and Mitchell claimed they were arresting Marcus outside the convenience store. The young tech wizard begins explaining the sophisticated enhancement techniques he used to restore the footage, his voice steady and professional as he details the chain of custody that makes the evidence unimpeachable. Marcus' grandmother Emma dabs at her eyes with a handkerchief as she watches herself on screen laughing and dancing with her grandson. The joy of that moment now transformed into something even more precious, an alibi wrapped in love and family celebration, her weathered hands reaching out to touch her daughter's arm as they both witness the power of truth unfolding before them, the party decorations in the background spelling out Happy 70th Emma in golden letters that seem to shine with vindication. Officer Mitchell feels the blood drain from his face as the video continues, showing Marcus helping his young cousin blow out the candles on the cake, his movements captured from 3 different security angles, each frame more damning than the last. The officer loosens his tie with trembling fingers, remembering how confident he had been filing the arrest report, never imagining that technology would betray their carefully constructed lies with such devastating clarity. Sarah Chen moves through the evidence like a conductor leading an orchestra, each new detail adding to the symphony of truth as she calls the birthday party venue owner to testify, the owner explaining how their state-of-the-art security system backs up footage to multiple secure locations, making tampering impossible. Peterson stares at his shoes, unable to watch as his career crumbles beneath the weight of irrefutable electronic evidence. The jury leans forward in their seats, collectively transfixed by the scene playing out before them. Marcus' red bow tie becoming a beacon of innocence against the dark suit he wore to celebrate his grandmother's milestone, several jurors scribbling furiously in their notepads, while others shake their heads in disbelief at the mounting evidence of police misconduct, their eyes occasionally darting to the two officers, who seem to shrink further into their chairs with each passing moment. Assistant District Attorney Torres closes her case file with an audible snap, her professional mask cracking as she realizes the magnitude of deception she unknowingly participated in. Her years of trust in officer testimony shattered by the incontrovertible proof playing on the screen. She begins drafting a mental list of other cases that will need to be reviewed, cases where these officers' testimonies formed the backbone of convictions. Judge Martinez removes her reading glasses, studying the footage with intense concentration, her decades of experience allowing her to recognize the seismic shift occurring in her courtroom as the video continues, showing Marcus giving a heartfelt toast to his grandmother at 10:15 p.m., the exact time he was allegedly being processed at the police station, her gavel hand tightening as she contemplates the severity of the officer's deception. The gathered reporters' phones buzz quietly as they update their editors, the story growing bigger with each passing second, knowing they are witnessing something historic, a moment when technology and truth align to expose systemic injustice, their fingers flying across keyboards as they capture every detail of the unfolding drama, the story already taking shape as tomorrow's headlines. Kevin Zhang concludes his presentation by showing the timestamp metadata verification, a technical flourish that serves as the final nail in the prosecution's coffin. The courtroom remaining eerily silent as the last frame freezes on screen, Marcus' smiling face captured in perfect clarity as he hugs his grandmother beneath a shower of golden confetti. 20 miles away from the crime he could never have committed, Officer Peterson and Mitchell exchange glances, knowing that their next stop will likely be the other side of the bars they once controlled, their weapons of authority transformed into instruments of their own undoing. Detective Maria Rodriguez, commanding attention in her crisp suit, strides to the witness stand, clutching 5 years' worth of precinct data in her hands, her testimony painting a devastating picture of targeted harassment that makes several jurors lean forward in their seats, her voice steady as she reveals how she discovered the pattern that would blow this case wide open, while the accused officers shift uncomfortably in their chairs, their faces growing paler with each damning statistic. The veteran detective opens the first of many spreadsheets, her 20 years of experience evident in every precise movement, as she explains how she began noticing discrepancies in arrest records during a routine audit, her investigation starting as a small thread that when pulled revealed an entire tapestry of prejudice and abuse, her voice carrying the weight of someone who has seen too much and can no longer remain silent, even as her former brothers in blue stare daggers at her from across the courtroom. Sarah Chen approaches the witness stand with a large visual display board showing arrest statistics by demographic, her questions guiding Rodriguez through the data that reveals how Peterson and Mitchell arrested African American men at a rate 8 times higher than any other officers in the precinct, the numbers stark and undeniable in their black and white clarity, the detective explaining how she cross-referenced every arrest with body camera footage, finding numerous instances where probable cause was manufactured out of thin air. The jury watches transfixed as Rodriguez projects a series of maps onto the courtroom screen showing how Peterson and Mitchell focused their patrols exclusively in predominantly African American neighborhoods, despite being assigned to a much broader jurisdiction, their patrol patterns forming a damning constellation of dots that spell out their true intentions, the detective highlighting specific cases where innocent men like Marcus were detained without cause, their lives disrupted by badges tarnished with prejudice. Officer Peterson starts drumming his fingers nervously on the table as Rodriguez reveals text messages between the partners joking about their targeting practices, messages she discovered during her internal investigation that they thought had been deleted but were recovered from the precinct server, back up their own words now echoing back at them like accusations from their past, the detective reading each message with clinical precision, letting the evidence speak for itself. Assistant District Attorney Torres watches her case disintegrating as Rodriguez presents body camera footage showing Peterson and Mitchell high-fiving after making questionable arrests, their cavalier attitude towards civil rights. Captured in high definition, the detective explaining how she compiled hundreds of hours of such footage, building an airtight case that went far beyond Marcus' incident, reaching into years of systematic abuse of power. Marcus' mother Gloria grits her Bible tighter as Rodriguez describes finding 15 other cases nearly identical to her son's, where young black men were arrested on fabricated charges, their lives derailed by officers who played judge, jury, and executioner on the streets, the detective pausing occasionally to let the weight of her words sink in her testimony, painting a picture of a justice system infected with the cancer of racism. Judge Martinez requests specific details about the internal reporting procedures, Rodriguez explaining how complaints against Peterson and Mitchell were systematically buried or ignored by supervising officers who were either complicit or willfully blind, the detective revealing a chain of accountability that had rusted through, leading citizens vulnerable to unchecked authority, her words causing several senior officers in the gallery to shift uncomfortably in their seats. The reporter's pens scratch frantically across notepads as Rodriguez unveils statistical analysis showing how the partners' arrest patterns changed dramatically when they knew they were under supervision, their behavior revealing consciousness of guilt as they temporarily adopted proper procedures only to return to their discriminatory practices when they thought no one was watching, the detective presenting graphs that track this pattern over multiple years. Rodriguez concludes her testimony by revealing how she took her findings to internal affairs only to be stonewalled by bureaucratic red tape, her determination leading her to reach out to Sarah Chen, directly knowing that only a public trial would force the department to confront its demons, the detective maintaining her composure, even as she acknowledges that her testimony today likely means the end of her career, her commitment to justice proving stronger than the blue wall of silence that had protected Peterson and Mitchell for so long. Sarah Chen moves like a chess master as she projects cell phone tower data onto the screen, demonstrating Marcus' location with scientific precision. The prosecution team whispers frantically among themselves as their case dissolves. Officer Mitchell starts loosening his tie while Marcus' mother grabs her neighbor's hand so tight her knuckles turn white, hope rising in her chest for the first time in months. A telecommunications expert from the phone company takes the stand, his credentials impeccable, as he explains how cell phone signals bounce between towers, creating an unmistakable digital trail of a person's movements, his laser pointer tracking the path of Marcus' phone on the night in question, the evidence showing an unbroken chain of connections to towers near his grandmother's birthday celebration, never once pinging off towers anywhere near the alleged crime scene, his testimony delivered with the confidence of pure scientific fact. Chen pulls up a split-screen display showing Marcus' phone records on one side and the officer's patrol car GPS data on the other, the timestamps synchronized to demonstrate the impossible nature of their claim about arresting him, the expert explaining how the officer's vehicle was actually 17 miles away from where they claimed to be when they supposedly encountered Marcus, the mathematical impossibility of their story laid bare in glowing digital evidence that no amount of explanation could reconcile. Officer Mitchell feels sweat trickling down his back as the expert presents a detailed analysis of call logs showing Marcus' long conversation with his college professor at the exact moment Peterson claimed he was reading him his rights, the professor already waiting in the witness chamber ready to confirm the content of their 45-minute discussion about Marcus' graduate school application, the walls of deception crumbling under the weight of technological truth that leaves no room for doubt. The prosecution team begins passing notes frantically, their carefully constructed case falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane, as Chen introduces surveillance footage from traffic cameras showing the police cruiser patrolling a completely different neighborhood at the time they claim to be arresting Marcus, the timestamp footage creating an airtight alibi that even the most skilled attorney could not dispute, their reputations dissolving with each new piece of evidence. Marcus' mother remembers the night in question, how she called him just after the birthday cake was served, their conversation recorded in the phone logs now displayed on the courtroom screen, her voice breaking as she recounts the joy in his voice as he described his grandmother's happiness, the memory now transformed into a powerful weapon against injustice as Chen highlights the call duration and tower location in bright yellow on the display. The telecommunications expert zooms in on a detailed map showing the exact path of Marcus' phone throughout the evening, each data point represented by a glowing dot that traces his movement from his apartment to the party venue and back. The evidence so precise it even shows his brief stop at the florist to pick up his grandmother's favorite roses, the digital breadcrumbs creating an unshakable timeline that proves his innocence beyond any shadow of doubt. Officer Peterson stares blankly at the screen as Chen presents a technical analysis of cell tower capacity and signal strength, the expert explaining how it would be physically impossible for Marcus' phone to have been in two locations at once, the science behind the evidence turning their false testimony into a mathematical absurdity, their lies exposed not by witnesses or confessions, but by the cold hard facts of digital technology that never lies. The jury appears mesmerized by the technical presentation, their notepads filling with diagrams and timestamps as the expert breaks down the complexities of cellular network architecture into understandable terms, several jurors nodding in understanding as the evidence builds into an insurmountable mountain of proof that transforms Marcus from accused criminal to obvious victim of police misconduct, their faces showing growing anger at the officer's abuse of power. Sarah Chen concludes this phase of evidence by revealing one final piece of digital proof, a series of text messages between Marcus and his young cousin sent throughout the birthday party, including selfies they took together, each message tagged with GPS coordinates that perfectly match the cell tower data, the timestamps, creating an unbroken chain of evidence that proves beyond any doubt that Marcus Johnson could not possibly have committed the crime for which he was arrested and imprisoned, the truth shining through the digital darkness like a beacon of justice that could no longer be ignored or denied. Officer Jamal Washington takes the stand, his voice trembling as he describes the locker room conversations that haunted his conscience for years, the courtroom hanging on every word as he reveals the casual racism and targeted profiling that poisoned the precinct. Officer Peterson stares daggers at his former colleague, but Washington speaks louder, his words carrying the weight of years of silent witness. Washington adjusts his badge, which gleams under the courtroom lights as he recounts the first time he overheard Peterson and Mitchell plotting their targeted patrols, his memory crystal clear of that rainy Tuesday morning 3 years ago when they joked about hunting in certain neighborhoods, his hands gripping the witness stand so tight his knuckles turn white as he describes how they would high-five after each arrest of a black man in an upscale area, calling it their own personal fishing game. The young officer describes the system of warnings that would spread through the precinct whenever internal affairs made their routine visits, how Peterson and Mitchell would suddenly become model officers following every procedure to the letter only to return to their discriminatory practices the moment the coast was clear, his voice gaining strength as he reveals the nicknames they used, their code words, for targeting specific demographics, the casual cruelty of their daily operations laid bare before the stunned courtroom. Sarah Chen guides Washington through his testimony as he pulls out his own notebook, detailing dates, times, and locations when he witnessed the officers fabricating probable cause, his meticulous records kept secretly in his locker, revealing a pattern of behavior so egregious that several jurors visibly recoil, his own shame at not speaking up sooner evident in the catch in his voice, as he describes watching Marcus being brought in that night, knowing in his gut that something was wrong. Peterson and Mitchell shift uncomfortably in their seats as Washington describes their bragging sessions in the break room, how they would compare their arrest numbers like scoring cards in a twisted game, their racist remarks echoing through the precinct unchallenged because anyone who spoke up found themselves assigned to the worst shifts or denied backup in dangerous situations, the toxic culture of silence that kept good officers quiet now being exposed by one man brave enough to risk everything for the truth. The gallery listens in shocked silence as Washington recounts specific incidents he witnessed, 23 cases where Peterson and Mitchell planted evidence, 12 instances of excessive force, 37 examples of racial profiling, all documented in his hidden notebook, each entry a damning testimony to years of unchecked abuse, his voice steady now as he reads from pages that would end careers and change lives, his testimony painting a picture of systematic racism that could no longer be ignored or denied. Marcus' mother weeps quietly as Washington describes how he saw her son being brought in that night, how Marcus kept asking to call this family to verify his whereabouts, how Peterson and Mitchell ignore his pleas, laughing about another successful hunt, the officer explaining how that moment became his breaking point, the catalyst that drove him to reach out to Detective Rodriguez, starting the chain of events that led to this day of reckoning. Judge Martinez leans forward intently as Washington reveals recordings he made on his phone of Peterson and Mitchell boasting about their methods, how they would target young black men in expensive cars or nice clothes, assuming they must be criminals. His evidence destroying not just the case against Marcus, but potentially hundreds of other convictions. His courage in coming forward, possibly opening the floodgates for a tsunami of appeals and investigations. The prosecution team sits in stunned silence as Washington describes the retaliation he faced after speaking to Internal Affairs, how his tires were slashed, his locker vandalized, threatening notes left on his desk, the price he paid for breaking the blue wall of silence evident in every word, yet his determination to tell the truth remaining unshaken even as he knows his career in law enforcement is effectively over, his testimony serving as oath, confession, and redemption. Officer Washington concludes his testimony by looking directly at Marcus, his voice thick with emotion as he apologizes for not speaking up sooner, the weight of years of complicity through silence lifting from his shoulders as he finally gives voice to the truth that had burned inside him for so long, his words echoing through the courtroom like a prayer for forgiveness and a pledge that the system can and must do better. The silence that follows filled with the weight of history and the promise of change. Judge Gloria Martinez, known for her poker face during trials, actually removes her glasses in shock as she reviews the pattern of falsified evidence spanning dozens of cases, her gavel forgotten in her hand as she interrupts the proceedings to demand immediate answers from the district attorney, who begins to sweat under the fluorescent lights. The seasoned judge with 30 years on the bench begins methodically laying out file after file, her voice growing increasingly stern as she connects the dots between cases that had come before her court over the years, cases where Peterson and Mitchell had testified, cases she had presided over and sentenced young men based on what she now realizes was fabricated evidence, her hands trembling with barely controlled fury as the full scope of the deception becomes clear. Martinez calls for her law clerk to bring in additional case files from her chambers, the young clerk rushing back and forth with stacks of manila folders that paint an ever darker picture of justice perverted. The judge, discovering that in the past 5 years alone Peterson and Mitchell had testified in over 200 cases in her courtroom alone, their testimony, now suspect their convictions, now potentially void, the implications staggering in their scope and severity. The district attorney rises to speak, but Martinez cuts him off with a sharp wave of her hand, her eyes blazing as she demands to know how his office failed to notice the pattern, the statistical impossibility of the officer's probable cause claims in case after case, the clearly falsified evidence that his prosecutors should have questioned, the systemic failure of oversight that allowed this cancer to grow unchecked in her courtroom. Sarah Chen approaches the bench with additional evidence showing how Peterson and Mitchell specifically targeted cases that would come before Judge Martinez, knowing her reputation for being tough on crime, using her dedication to justice as a weapon against the very principles she sought to uphold. The judge growing visibly pale as she realizes how her own commitment to law and order had been manipulated to serve injustice. The courtroom falls into stunned silence as Martinez begins reading aloud from her own case notes spanning years of trials, her photographic memory connecting details that seemed insignificant at the time but now form a damning pattern of corruption, her voice growing hoarse with emotion as she recalls faces of young men she had sentenced, trusting the testimony of officers who now stood revealed as architects of injustice. Officer Peterson stares at the floor as Martinez recites from memory specific testimony he had given in her courtroom, dates, times, locations that he had claimed to be certain about, facts that now dissolve under the weight of evidence, his lies exposed not just in Marcus' case, but in hundreds of others. The judge systematically dismantling years of perjury with the precision of a surgeon excising a tumor. The gallery watches in awe as Martinez pulls up her own digital archives, displaying case after case on the courtroom screen, her meticulous notes revealing a pattern that should have been obvious, her growing outrage evident in the strength of her voice as she announces her intention to personally review every case Peterson and Mitchell had ever testified in her courtroom, her dedication to justice now turned toward uncovering the full scope of their deceit. Marcus' mother clasps her hands in prayer as Martinez orders an immediate investigation into all convictions based on testimony from these officers, the judge declaring her intention to personally sign release orders for anyone currently incarcerated based solely on their word, her authority now becoming a force for restoration rather than punishment, her commitment to justice finding a new and powerful direction. The district attorney frantically whispers with his team as Martinez demands a full audit of every case involving these officers, reaching back to the beginning of their careers, her determination to right these wrongs evident in every word as she announces her intention to convene a special grand jury to investigate not just Peterson and Mitchell, but the entire chain of command that allowed their behavior to continue unchecked for so long. Judge Martinez concludes her unprecedented intervention by declaring a brief recess, her final words echoing through the stunned courtroom as she announces her intention to refer this matter to the Department of Justice for a complete investigation of the entire police department. Her decades of experience transforming from unwitting accomplice to avenging angel of justice, her commitment to truth and accountability now focused on healing the wounds inflicted by years of systematic abuse. Tears flow freely from Marcus' grandmother in the gallery as the judge declares him innocent and orders his immediate release. The officers are stripped of their badges right there in the courtroom, their careers ending as Marcus' freedom begins anew, the moment hanging in the air like suspended crystal before shattering into a cascade of emotions and consequences. Judge Martinez's voice rings with authority as she pronounces the verdict, her words cutting through the tension like lightning through storm clouds, declaring Marcus Johnson innocent of all charges, ordering his immediate release and restoration of all rights. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut around Peterson and Mitchell's wrists echoing through the courthouse like bells tolling the end of an era of injustice. The bailiff moves swiftly to take the former officers into custody, their faces ashen as their badges and service weapons are collected, their expressions frozen in disbelief as they are read their rights, the very words they had used so carelessly against others now being used against them, their world turning upside down as they are led toward the same holding cells where they had placed so many innocent men. Marcus' mother collapses into her church group's arms, sobbing with joy as her son is officially declared a free man. The prayer circle that had gathered every Sunday during his imprisonment now raising their voices in praise and thanksgiving, their faith in justice finally rewarded, their persistent prayers answered in this moment of triumph and vindication. Sarah Chen gathers her materials with steady hands, her victory complete, yet her mind already turning to the other cases that would need to be revisited, the other lives that needed to be restored, her dedication to justice not ending with Marcus, but extending to all those affected by these officers' years of misconduct, her quiet determination to see this through to the end evident in every precise movement. The gallery erupts in controlled chaos as family members of other victims stand up, identifying themselves, requesting their cases be reviewed, their voices joining in a chorus of long-suppressed pain and hope. Judge Martinez acknowledging each one, making notes, ensuring that no cry for justice would go unheard, this time the momentum of truth carrying forward like a wave of restoration. Officer Washington stands tall despite the glares from other officers in the gallery, his decision to break the blue wall of silence vindicated by this outcome, his sacrifice proved worthwhile as he watches justice being served, his own future uncertain, but his conscience finally clear as he witnesses the impact of speaking truth to power. Marcus approaches his grandmother, who had never lost faith, dancing with her again right there in the courtroom, recreating their moment from the birthday party that had proved his innocence, their joy infectious as others join in the celebration, the somber courtroom transforming into a scene of jubilation and healing, the power of truth breaking chains, both literal and metaphorical. The district attorney begins immediate procedures to expunge Marcus' record, prosecutors frantically pulling files of similar cases, their office transformed from instrument of persecution to engine of restoration as they work to identify other potential wrongful convictions, their dedication to justice finding new purpose in correcting past wrongs. Judge Martinez signs the official release papers, her signature flowing across the page like a river of hope, ordering not just Marcus' freedom, but full restoration of his rights and immediate consideration of civil damages, her authority now wielded as a tool of healing rather than punishment, her legacy forever altered by this case that exposed the cancer of corruption in her courthouse. The news media scrambles to capture every detail, reporters' phones lighting up as they break the story to their networks, the importance of this verdict rippling outward from the courtroom into the city and beyond, their headlines already taking shape as they document this historic moment of justice restored and system reformed. The former officers now in custody shuffle toward the holding cells, their heads bowed as they pass Marcus, their arrogance replaced by the weight of consequence, their years of unchecked power ending in disgrace, their legacy one of cautionary tale rather than protection and service, the very system they had abused now ensuring they would face the justice they had denied to others. The story makes national headlines, sparking a department-wide investigation that leads to sweeping reforms in police training and accountability. Marcus walks out of the courthouse into bright sunlight surrounded by supporters, knowing his ordeal will help prevent others from facing the same injustice, the system slowly bending toward justice one case at a time. News helicopters circle overhead capturing the moment. Marcus emerges from the courthouse steps, his mother and grandmother on either side, their faces glowing with triumph as hundreds of supporters chant his name, the crowd a sea of raised phones and cameras, documenting a moment that would become a symbol of hope for communities across the nation, their voices rising in unified celebration of justice long delayed but finally delivered. Sarah Chen stands at the microphone bank, her voice steady as she announces the filing of a $100 million civil rights lawsuit against the department, her words carrying across live broadcasts to millions of viewers as she outlines the systematic changes this case would demand from police departments nationwide, her dedication to reform now extending far beyond this single victory to challenge the very foundations of biased policing. The police chief holds an emergency press conference announcing immediate policy changes, including mandatory body camera reviews, enhanced civilian oversight, and zero tolerance for discriminatory practices, his hands shaking slightly as he reads from a prepared statement acknowledging the departmental failures that allowed Peterson and Mitchell to operate unchecked for so long, his words marking the beginning of a painful but necessary transformation. Marcus embraces Officer Washington, who risked everything to tell the truth, the two men standing together as symbols of what courage and integrity look like, their unexpected alliance demonstrating that change comes from both outside pressure and inside conscience, their handshake captured by dozens of cameras becoming tomorrow's front page image, a powerful testament to reconciliation and reform. Social media explodes with the story, hashtags trending nationwide as activists, organizations, and citizens share Marcus' story, their voices joining in a digital chorus demanding accountability and change across all police departments, the case becoming a rallying cry for reform movements, their momentum building like a tsunami of public opinion that could no longer be ignored or dismissed. Judge Martinez signs executive orders creating a special task force to review every case touched by Peterson and Mitchell in the past decade, their investigation expanding to include other officers who might have engaged in similar practices, her authority now focused on systematic change, rather than individual cases, her legacy transforming from enforcer to reformer. The district attorney's office announces the immediate release of 37 individuals previously convicted on Peterson and Mitchell's testimony alone, their families rushing to the county jail to welcome them home, their stories of injustice finally heard, their freedom a direct result of Marcus' case, breaking open the wall of silence, their gratitude flowing like tears as they reunite with loved ones. Marcus, standing tall in his first post-release interview, discusses his plans to create a foundation supporting victims of police misconduct, his ordeal transformed into purpose, his pain channeled into positive change, his voice steady as he describes his vision for community police cooperation, his experience becoming a catalyst for healing and transformation. The police academy curriculum undergoes immediate revision, incorporating lessons from this case into their training programs, future officers learning about the consequences of bias and the importance of integrity, their education now including extensive sections on cultural sensitivity and ethical decision-making, their training shaped by the harsh lessons of past failures. Activists gather at City Hall demanding civilian review boards with real power, their voices amplified by Marcus' victory, their long-fought battle for police accountability gaining new momentum, their persistence finally yielding concrete results as city council members rush to draft new oversight legislation. Marcus' grandmother hosts a celebration dinner mixing supporters, activists, and reform-minded officers in her backyard, her famous cooking bringing people together, her wisdom helping bridge divides, her home becoming a symbol of how communities can heal and grow stronger through adversity and understanding. The story reaches the Justice Department, prompting a nationwide review of similar cases in other cities, their investigation expanding like ripples in a pond, touching departments across the country, their findings leading to systematic changes in police practices and accountability measures, their response demonstrating that one case can indeed change an entire system.